Dave's here.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Claude Williams, and we are going to go through CISSP, which is Certified Information System Security Professional, versus CASP, the CompTIA Advanced Security Professional, or Practitioner, I'm sorry, by, again, CompTIA, versus CISM, which is the Certified Information Security Manager. Kind of compare and contrast the different certifications, what it takes to obtain them, what it takes to maintain them, what the cost is, what the challenge is. And then if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain those. At any given point in my career, I've had probably, I want to say, over a dozen certifications. Started off many years ago with Novell Technologies, became a CNE, certified Novell, or at that time NetWare engineer, and became a certification junkie. I currently hold the CISSP and the CASP, as well as at one point I held the CISM. Have considered getting it again just to have it as part of my signature block, but we can talk about the pros and cons of the CISM certification as we get to that topic within the slide deck. At this point, I'm going to share my screen and get on with the presentation. Bear with me as I pull it up. Here we go, I hope. All right, so as far as these certifications are concerned, there are many organizations that in hiring will look for you to have proven credentials. Prove that you actually know how to apply certain technologies, or if you will, proof that you at least have a foundational understanding of information security and information security concepts. The CISSP is probably the leader when it comes to that. That's a great validation of your skills, or at least your knowledge. CASP is growing in that way. And CISM is, you know, after the CISSP, the CISM kind of filled a niche that was really focused just on governance and management. And so that's another validation certification, if you will, that employers are looking for. Now, if you're working for the government, there's two major initiatives, and one is a true mandate that may be of interest to you that involves these certifications. One is that the DoD, Department of Defense, has DoD mandate 8570. 8570 has blocks that if you want to hold a position for which deals with information assurance, there's different blocks of certifications that you will have to obtain. You might want to do a search online for 8570 or DoD mandate 8570, and you'll get more information. We call it the matrix, and for different jobs within the DoD, you'll fit in a different blocks of the matrix, and certain certifications are required there. From a civilian perspective, there's the NICE initiative. That is the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. That's another one that not only looks at certification, but looks at education. Certification is one way to validate that you can or you should possess a certain job within the government. But now they're expanding that beyond certification to, well, do you have a degree and what your degree is in, or do you have formal training in something? That can also be a way to show qualification for a given job. In other words, what the government is doing is saying, look, we want validation that you know at least at a foundational level what security is about. Okay, so with that being said, we know the government's looking for it, and we know the commercial sector's looking for it. So certification should be something you're looking for. Which one or which ones should you obtain? And that's why we're discussing CISSP versus CASP versus CISM. So the two main ones for many years have been really CISSP and CISM. CASP now kind of joins in, and CompTIA, smart enough to know that they have to position this certification, has created this somewhat of a certification path. So many of you may know that in CompTIA you start off at A+, which is the basics of hardware, software. Then you move into Network Plus, which is how do I network all these devices, hardware and software, if you will. And then you move on to Security Plus. And Security Plus is how do I secure that network and the hardware and software that's on that network. But where would you go from there? For many years, it's been, okay, after Security Plus, if you want to stay in the security realm for certification, you would go CISSP. But many folks who went towards the CISSP realized, well, wait a minute, this is not for practitioners. This is not really applying knowledge more so than it is trying to get a wealth of knowledge about what could happen on a network and how we might protect ourselves. It was a bunch of concepts that a manager should know, but not really a practitioner, because the practitioner should be actually implementing something, right? So CompTIA, at the urging of the government, honestly, the DoD, created a certification that kind of, in some cases, may bridge the gap between Security Plus and CISSP. In my opinion, it doesn't bridge the gap. It's an alternative to CISSP. In actuality, my belief is that you go Security Plus, and then you figure out, well, am I going to be the person implementing firewalls? Am I going to be the person implementing an IDS? Or am I going to be the person that helps to form policy and process and helps to set a standard? Because if I'm going to be the practitioner, again, working the firewall, working the IDS, then CASP makes sense. The CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner makes sense, because that's all about really the technical aspects of security, where CISSP is really, hey, what are all the possibilities to a secure environment, and then which ones would I choose under what circumstances? But it has nothing to do with actually directly applying the technology or the technological aspects of security. So to me, it's kind of either or. Now, if I'm looking to enrich my resume, I'm probably going to do both, because it really looks good on the resume. And I hold both, and I believe in both. But again, the CASP is for the practitioner, the guy pushing the buttons, the one that's going to implement the technological solutions. Where CISSP is, yeah, I should know about all that stuff, but I'm not the guy who's going to, push the buttons. I'm not the guy who's going to sit behind the firewall or look at firewall logs. I'm the guy who's going to require that that's done. That DoD directive or mandate that I mentioned earlier, 8570.1, kind of looks like this. And then you'll see here that CASP, CISM, and CISSP are represented here. I won't go into the ins and outs of what an IAT level 1 versus a level 3 is, or an IAM versus an IAT, but the bottom line is that there is a government DoD mandate to hold certain certifications. And you can see that all three of the certifications that we're talking about here are mentioned within that mandate. So they're good certifications to have if you're looking to work for the government, whether it be DoD or whether it be the civilian side, because these are certifications that the government looks for in general, as well as in the commercial world. More and more commercial organizations are looking for validation of skills, and certification provides that. So let's focus on CASP for a moment. For the practitioners, CASP, CompTIA Advanced Security Practitioner, is, well, many of you might have heard that CISSP is one of the toughest exams when it comes to information security. And that is absolutely 100% accurate. I took my initial exam back in 2004 for CISSP. And let me tell you, I don't think I had a harder exam up to that point. And remember, I've held, at any given point, at least a dozen certifications since I began this. I've probably taken well over 160 exams last time I counted. I'm Microsoft certified, I'm Cisco certified, I hold these industry vendor agnostic certifications. I'm even LAN server certified. If you're a more mature person in this industry, you'll know that's IBM's products. So I've taken a lot of exams, but the CISSP was one of the most difficult. It really was demanding and grueling. And I'll get into why that was true back in 2004 and how things might have changed today in just a few minutes when I get to CISSP. But the reason I'm referencing CISSP as I talk about CASP is because I thought this exam was just as demanding. maybe not as difficult, but just as demanding. So anyone who is preparing for their CASP should not take it lightly. Don't believe that it is Security Plus on steroids. It's bigger than that. It is a fresh perspective on how to deliver an exam. CompTIA has been talking about moving to simulation-based exams. Well, guess what? They've done it here. This is a simulation-based exam, and without violating any type of confidentiality that I signed when I took the exam. Just to let you know, my first 7 questions were simulation exams. Simulation questions. My first 7 questions were simulations. So that immediately, if you're a test taker, can give you a, well, if you're good at simulations, it can make you feel great. If you're not so good at simulations and actually, getting in there and telnetting and RDPing to different devices on a network, this can really set a bad tone for you through the rest of the exam, because you're like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? So I felt that it was really a demanding exam because it starts off with 7 simulations, and if you're not ready for them, they throw you for a loop. Now, being that I'm a manager now and I've been on the management side of security, I also wasn't really ready for these simulations because I don't go and use Telnet all the time. I don't RDP on a regular basis. I know what these things are, but they're actually required me to do it. And that really did throw me for a loop early on. So this is a demanding exam, one, because of the simulations, okay? And you're not 100% sure what they're looking for. That was another thing about this exam that kind of threw me, was what is, they want the final result, but what is that result supposed to truly look like during the simulation? So that's a bit of a challenge. So if you're looking at practicing for this exam, you want to look for practice exams or training classes that provide you with an opportunity to actually, go through those simulation scenarios. It is a multiple choice exam beyond the 7 simulations. They're all scenario based. I'll show you an example of a question coming up on the following slide. And it is, again, performance based, which means you really have to know your stuff, because they're asking you questions that only someone who performs the job or has performed the job would know how to answer, right? Like, looking at this log file, what would you believe would be, the type of breach? Unless you do that as a practitioner, you're not going to be able to answer the question. The multiple choice questions in the simulation cover enterprise security, risk management, policy, procedure, and legal, which is different than Security Plus. I mean, you got into policy, but you really didn't get into legal and compliance issues. The exam also covers research and analysis, integration of computing, communications, and business disciplines. So it is Security Plus as a foundation with added aspects, especially that legal, okay? Especially that legal. Now, from the perspective of what types of legal questions, they're really around compliance and perhaps what you as a practitioner can do to help show compliance, more so than actually knowing the laws and knowing the regulations. They're not really asking those types of questions. The subjects that will be included on the exam that you should have good knowledge and good conceptual understanding of are IP version 6. That's right, even though it's not truly real, or I shouldn't say real, it's real, but not prevalent today in security. It is something that we all want to grow towards. Each year, of course, there's a move towards the internet becoming IPv6. There's IPv6 Day, if you will. And so CompTIA is doing their part by making sure that security practitioners today know something about IPv6, because it is an eventuality. You do need to know something about voice over IP, which is a mainstay of our industry today. It addresses software as a service. That's one of the objectives that has to be met. And really understanding from a legal perspective things like SLAs. Okay? As a practitioner, you may be responsible for meeting the service levels that have been agreed upon by your organization, whether it be whether it be towards an external organization or whether it be within your own organization. Understanding SLAs and your obligation towards them. So those are some of the subjects that are somewhat maybe different than what you dealt with in Security Plus, and may not even show up perhaps as deep as they should in CISSP and CISM. As I think about my CISSP teachings and my training that I've taken and the exam itself, there weren't many IPv6 questions. There were limited voice over IP and less about really truly SLAs. So that's why I've kind of brought that out here as subjects that in the subjects that are included, so that you focus on that as you're preparing for the exam and realize from a practitioner perspective, you better know IPv6, you better understand voice over IP and software as a service and SLAs. Now, the recertification requirement is very similar to CISSP and CISM, and there's a reason why. It goes back to that 8570. Because in order to be part of that mandate that the DoD put out, certifications had to meet a certain criteria. And one of the criterion that was required is simply, and I guess that's redundant, required in criterion, but one of the things was there had to be a recertification, and it had to be kind of on a 3-year cycle. Now, all of them, CISM, CISSP, and of course CASP, have that recertification requirement. The difference is how you maintain that certification. Okay? They require some form of continuing education. Some may call it continuing education units. Some may call it continuing professional education. Whatever it's called, they all require some form of continuing education, but at different amounts. And how you accumulate that continuing education is different for each of them. Okay? And I'll go a little deeper into that as we look at some additional slides coming up. The exam breakdown. Everybody wants to know, what am I going to face on the exam? So in order to become a CASP, there's really one thing you need to do. Pass the exam. Simple as that. Now, there are some requirements behind it to sit for the exam, but really, passing the exam, you're done. That is not like CISSP and CISM. They require more than just passing the exam. But for CASP, it's just the exam. The exam is broken down to enterprise security being 40% of the exam. Risk management, policy, procedure, and legal, about 24%. Thirdly, integration of computing, communication, and business disciplines. And then finally, 14% is research and analysis. Okay, understanding that process. Okay, part of that analysis, by the way, is how do I measure, right? Measurements. I guess I don't need to tell you that that totals 100%. That's a good thing, because if it was 110%, I don't know how we'd meet that. A little bit of a joke. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's the exam breakdown. For CASP, once you pass the exam, you're done. You're a CASP. You can put that on your signature block. You can go celebrate with your friends. You can invite them over for a barbecue. Whatever you want to do, you're a CASP. But 3 years from now, will you still be a CASP? Well, only if you renew. Renewal is going to require you pay an annual maintenance fee. It's known as an AMF, an annual maintenance fee, and that you meet the continuing education units requirement. Okay, so I've gone to the CompTIA website, and I've brought this before you so that you know how CASP stacks up with the other certifications of CompTIA. CASP is going to require $49 a year be paid. Okay, so in a 3-year cycle, that's, you know, what, $147, right? And within that 3-year period, you will need to have accumulated 75 CEUs. Now, understand, that's about 25 a year. That's not 75 annually, that's 75 in a 3-year cycle, where folks get confused, okay? So you need your CEUs, and you need to pay your CE fee. Don't wait until the last year of your 3-year cycle to try to get all 75, because you may find yourself in a position where you can't accumulate them. CompTIA has some specific rules about what qualifies. And I would urge you to go to their website. They're very clear in what qualifies. Suffice it to say, though, most training you might take, most in-house training, most external training classes, events like this that focus on the subject matter of CASP will qualify at 1 hour of presentation to 1 CEU. Okay? Now, again, I urge you to take a look at CompTIA's website, validate that, as well as understand what you're participating in on whether it actually, qualifies. It's simple. I'm going to go backwards a moment. If whatever you're participating in speaks to the domains of CASP, then it qualifies for CE. Okay, so if you take a class with Phoenix TS, let's say, since I represent them, on enterprise security or risk management, that will qualify. Every hour of instruction will qualify for CE. If I'm currently a Security Plus and I up my certification to CASP, I no longer have to be responsible for Security Plus CEs. I only have to be responsible for CASP CEs. And let's say I'm in my second year of Security Plus and I go get my CASP, it starts off a fresh 3 years. I don't have to worry about Security Plus anymore, and I have 3 years from being CASP certified to actually get my CEs required to keep CASP. I hope that makes sense. Here's a sample question from CASP. This is not stolen from their exam, so don't you dare think that I stole this from their exam. But this is an example of what a question might look like. Okay, company XYZ provides residential television cable service across a large region. The company's board of directors is in the process of approving a deal with the following 3 companies: a national landline telephone provider, a regional wireless telephone provider, and an international internet service provider. And then it goes on. I'm not going to go through the entire question, but I want you to see 2 things. Number 1, look at all that crap you have to read. I mean, come on. That's a lot. Number 2, it is a scenario. They're trying to get the test taker to identify with a real-world scenario and come up with, well, I would say a real-world answer, although it's based on how CompTIA sees it, right? Because you might say, I wouldn't do any one of these 4 things, never in a million years. But that's not how CompTIA sees it. Remember, you're taking a CompTIA exam, give them the answer they want. But based on what you know from the CASP domains, what would be the best answer to this scenario? So it's a scenario-based exam. That's number 1. It's not what is or what does this stand for, like with Security Plus. For example, I would tell my students in Security Plus, I would say, you're going to need to know what DES stands for, DES, which is Data Encryption Standard. Because you may have a question that says, what does DES stand for? And it may even say, in the following situation, it may say, can you tell me an algorithm that was created in the 1970s and was created to be a DoD standard by the NSA? And the answer would be DES. That's not a scenario, right? That's basically having you provide an answer for stuff that you memorized. That's not scenario-based. CASP has very few, if any, of those types of questions, and they're all truly scenario-based. So I have to have memorized and understood the concepts to approach the questions here. As a matter of fact, not only CASP is that way, but so is CISSP and so is CISM. It's not about memorizing a bunch of facts and spitting them back. It is truly understanding the concepts and how they could be used, applied to answer the scenario-based questions. There's the difference. So now let's talk about probably one of my favorite certifications. Okay, it's not probably. It is my favorite. And I don't want to, I'm not discounting CASP, I'm not discounting CISM, but CISSP is one of my favorites, and there's a reason. I used to work for the organization, ISC Squared, and I worked for them for 5.5 years promoting the CISSP, so I guess that makes me a little biased. But I do believe this is a good test, a strong test of someone's overall, overarching, and holistic view and understanding of security, because it's going to deal with everything that makes up a strong, or what should make up a strong security posture within an organization. Everything from, if you look at the domains that are represented here, everything from physical security, the very basics of the very bottom level one of the OSI reference model. I'm talking dogs, guns, doors, locks. I'm talking physical intrusion all the way through, if you will, network intrusion, right? The network itself. So we're going from tangible information security assets, such as, you know, files and pieces of paper and hard drives, which are tangible, to stuff that's intangible, the ones and zeros on your network that could be intercepted and could be converted into information, right? So it covers the whole gamut. And then it goes further. It says, well, do you understand the legal ramifications of what you need to do, or what you don't do, or what you do? Do you understand software development? Do you speak the same language as software engineers? Do you know what polyinstantiation is? Do you know what polymorphism is? Do you know what clean room is? These are security aspects that most people forget about. They don't, you know, if you go ask someone, do they do network security? Well, you're asking about a very specific niche within security. That's not holistic. A good security person understands the, you know, the physical security aspects and how they impact the telecommunications and network security aspects, and how that's impacted by the software that's running on their network, and how that's impacted by the laws, the compliance, and ethics issues. And ultimately, they understand how all of that is managed around risk. That's why I think CISSP is one of those that if I was an employee, I'm looking for someone who might hold that, because they will see my environment not just from a network security perspective or software development perspective and security and, you know, protecting against malicious software, but holistically. They look at it as information security. And it's not about just technology as much as it's about concepts and components and elements coming together. That's the difference. See, CASP is going to focus on, hey, do I understand policy and all that? Do I understand how that impacts, you know, what I have to do on a firewall and that type of thing? Where CISSPs, well, I'm not worried necessarily about a firewall, except for the fact, do we have them, and do they have the right rules? I don't even know if I know what the right rules are as a CISSP, but I know they have to have rules that carry out my security policy. That's what the focus is of CISSP. So you can take a look at those 10 domains. I would tell you some of the more challenging domains that are listed here for most people are cryptography, one of my favorites though. You know, when I teach this class, I take a whole day to really focus on the cryptography, right? And some people would say, well, 5 days to cover this is not enough. You're right, it's not. You know, most programs only run 5 days. Anything shorter than that, you're wasting your time. That's number one. Even with 5 days, it's hard to cover everything. And I spent a whole day out of the 10 domains on crypto. You should understand that when you take one of these classes, it is a review of concepts. You can't really teach all those concepts in 5 days. You just can't. You know, if you sign up for a training class here at Phoenix TS, what we're going to do is give you pre-class study material, right? So that you can do some things before you get there to make sure when you're in class you can maximize the opportunity, okay? So whether you choose us or choose someone else to deliver it, what you got to know is that you got to come in with some familiarity. And what you're expecting out of the class is to hone in on the things that you have to know for the exam, right? And I spent a whole day on crypto. But you see, many people dig too deep into crypto when really what they're after is a manager's understanding, which is very surface level. The CISSP is really for folks that are transitioning from being practitioners to now being managers. They need to see things holistically. They need to get away from the technology, but yet have an understanding of how to leverage the technology. And so therefore, you don't have to go to great depth in any one of these sections. You just need to know enough to be able to make sure when someone is presenting a case to you as a manager, you can ask the right questions and get the answers that really lend themselves to greater security within the organization. And it all starts with risk, and then what cryptographical solutions could be used to manage risk. It's all about controls. Everything within the 10 domains is about controls and how they are used to manage risk. So CISSP by ISC squared. It is a scenario-based exam where CASP, and I might have skipped that, the CASP exam is about 71 questions. I think it's, I don't think, it is an adaptive exam, so you could get more questions, you could get less. It's about a 3-hour exam, 3.5 hours to take the exam, and it's grueling. That's CASP. Coming back to CISSP, not 71 questions, but 250 multiple choice questions, okay? Where CASP has simulations, CISSP, no simulations. It's all multiple choice questions. It's either A, B, C, or D. It's never A, B, C. It's never A and B or A, B, C or all of the above, none of that. It is either A, B, C, or D. And it's choose the best answer. Can there be more than one right answer represented? Can there be more than one answer, correct answer being presented to you? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's choose the best answer based on what's called the CBK, Common Body of Knowledge of ISC squared. Okay? So you may see all 4 of the answers are correct. Choose the best answer according to ISC squared. You may see that none of them is quite right. You would never dream of implementing that solution in your world. Well, what's right in the ISC squared world, or in the, really, what's the best answer in the ISC squared world? You have to give them the answer that they're looking for. Okay? You are given 6 hours for 250 questions. Now, don't you try to figure out, well, how much time am I given per question? That won't work, because some questions will take more of your time. Some questions will be really quick. You know, it'd be easy for you and quick for you to derive the correct answer. You know, some questions I can answer within, you know, literally 10 to 15 seconds. But then there's others that took me a couple of minutes. So don't try to break it down, you know, unless you're just that type of analytical person where you try to figure out, you know, how much time you're allotted per question. That just gets you into trouble, okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier, I took my exam back in 2004. Then it was paper-based, and it was grueling. I was sitting in a room with maybe 50 other test takers, and you know, you could hear sobbing as people were crying over the questions they received and how difficult the exam was. You could hear people sucking their teeth because they were mad. You could hear people banging their desks. It was the whole gamut of emotions within that room. It is a tough exam. I normally tell my students that when you're done with the exam, there's only 2 things you know. One is that you never, ever want to take that exam again. You never want to give up a weekend or the time. Back then it was given mainly on Saturdays and Sundays. You never want to give up a weekend or, you know, a day of your weekend to this exam. And the second thing that I would tell them they would know if they were to take that exam back then was they would have no clue to whether they passed or failed. It is a tough exam. Most people come out believing they failed. So if that's your experience, you know, understand that that's the norm. The good news is that, you know, a fair amount of us pass the first time through. And I was one of those, not because I'm special in any way. It's just because I really understood what they're after. They're not after depth of knowledge in each of these domains. They're after understanding or having you gain the understanding of how these different domains, these concepts, and these controls specifically can be grafted together to create a solution. So it's really, again, scenario-based, solution-oriented exam. 250 questions, multiple choice, A, B, C, or D, 6 hours given, and you may need the whole time. Today, the exam is computer-based. Back in my day, when I took it in 2004, it was one of those things where I took the exam, and the worst part about it was waiting 4 to 6 weeks to get the answer of whether I passed or failed. That's right. 4 to 6 weeks. So after the exam, you know what I did? I found myself a bottle and curled up on the couch and tried to, drink my cares away. And I'm not telling you what was in the bottle. It could have been just milk. You don't know. But it was painful for the rest of that weekend. Even into the next week, I was mentally exhausted, and I still had the worry of whether I passed or failed for 4 to 6 weeks. Today, it's instantaneous. You take the exam computer-based at one of the VUE, VUE, owned facilities. So this exam is not given everywhere. It's got to be a VUE-owned facility. I go take the exam, and I know immediately when I hit submit whether I passed or failed. The focus of the exam is really management concepts. If you are a technologist, if you are a practitioner, you need to elevate your thinking, or some of you who are technologists might say lower my thinking. I don't know what your view is of managers, but it is really management concepts. It's all focused on how managers would think, how they would approach a problem, not how practitioners would. Okay, I always say it's the difference in William Shatner portraying, Captain Kirk, and Patrick Stewart really playing Jean-Luc Picard. If you are a Star Trek fan, Captain Kirk would rush in to situations with guns blazing, where Picard would kind of analyze the situation first and figure out which way to move. Well, the manager here, the better manager, according to CISSP, if you will, maybe even Claude Williams, is the fact that you analyze the situation before you, before you deploy a solution, and you analyze the solution to make sure it meets the criteria, right, set forth by the problem. Where practitioners tend to just say, oh, pull the plug. If something ain't happening right or something's going wrong, pull the plug. A manager may say, well, let's analyze this. And that's one of the concepts that is discussed in my class, is violation analysis. You don't just pull a plug because something appears to be doing, something malicious. You analyze it, especially if it's not doing immediate or causing immediate damage, because it could be something that's sanctioned or authorized. So it's really management level thinking versus the practitioner level thinking that many of us might have. Recertification. The recertification requirements are very similar to CASP and CISM. It's a 3-year cycle, but here we need 120 what we call CPEs. Where CASP called them CEUs, CISSP calls them CPE, continuing professional education. You need 120 of those within a 3-year cycle. And of course, you've got to pay your annual maintenance fee. Your annual maintenance fee is $85 a year for CISSP. I know they've been talking about raising that price, but right now it's $85, unless they've changed it within the last week or so. But expect that to go up at some point. It's been that way since, going back to 2000, since the turn of the century, if you will, truly. So you must also adhere to a code of ethics. This is true of CISM as well. Any violations in the ethical code, and you could lose your certification. Okay, and there is an ethical board, or at least a legal counsel component within CISSP that will hear grievances, where accusers could literally lodge a complaint that you've violated the ethical code. Certainly, if there's a news article that shows that you have, hacked the White House, or you've committed some other type of malicious behavior, I think that's going to immediately be caught, perhaps by CISSP, and there won't be a need for someone to lodge a complaint. Nevertheless, they take the ethical code very, very seriously. Before you can even apply to take the exam, you must go through background validation. Now, the truth of how this works is, obviously, they may not do an in-depth background check during the actual application process, but believe me, if you were to pass the exam to move on to the process of being certified, they want to make sure that they're not certifying a convicted felon or a known hacker. Okay, background validation. Have you ever been convicted? And these are questions directly from the application. Have you ever been convicted of a felony, a crime based on dishonesty, whether it be a felony or misdemeanor involving lying, or a court-martial in military service? Or is there a felony charge now pending against you? So they're really specifically after felony, but they're also after folks that, you know, may have ethical issues, right? Like lying, okay? So if there's a misdemeanor at this point, it's not something that you need to put on your application unless it deals with lying, some form of dishonesty. Have you ever been involved or publicly identified with criminal hackers or hacking? This doesn't immediately, by the way, disqualify you, but you need to put that honestly on there, because again, that goes back to the earlier one. Can you be found to be, you know, honorable? And have you ever had a professional license, certification, membership, or registration revoked? I hope that doesn't include my license. Or have you ever been censored or disciplined by a professional organization or government agency? Okay, so those are the questions that you'll have to answer in trying to become an CISSP. Those are also questions that really you have to answer every time you go through recertification, okay? Because something could change within that 3-year period. So be prepared to answer those questions. So that brings me back to a point. With CASP, all I have to do is really take an exam. With CISSP, I have to go through an application process. That's number one. Take the exam, and then finally, once I pass the exam, I have to be endorsed by another member of ISC Squared. Now, a member is anyone who holds an ISC Squared certification, such as SSCP, CISSP, CSSLP, and some others, right? They have the new healthcare one, the HCISPP. They also have their forensic one, CSFP, I believe. So anybody who holds one of their certifications is considered a member of ISC Squared, and they can endorse you for certification. As far as these questions are concerned, the annual maintenance fee, the continuing professional education credits, and more around endorsement, I recommend going to isc2.org. Okay, isc2.org. A sample question would be something along this line. Senior management decides to buy a new secure application development platform and mandates that all new development take place using this platform. Management spends serious money on acquisition and training. Developers report that most do not have enough hard disk space to install app or save output files. Also, most do not have enough RAM to run the application at an acceptable pace. To prevent this problem from happening again in the future, the company needs. Okay, this is again a scenario-based question, right? And you may get this one, synopsis of the situation, but you could get 3 or 4 questions after it. So the first part is kind of the scenario, but there could be 3 or 4 questions based on that scenario. And that's very much the CISSP experience. So at a glance between the two, that have CASP and CISSP, we have CASP, 1 exam, CISSP, 1 exam. CASP is a blended format, which basically means you have simulations, where CISSP is all scenarios. Okay, CISSP requires to actually obtain the certification endorsement. You passed the CISSP exam, congratulations, you just passed an exam. You're not a CISSP. It requires endorsement. Only when the endorsement is submitted and you receive receipt of that are you considered a CISSP. CASP, about 71 questions, 2 hours and 45 minutes is given. CISSP, 250 questions, 6 hours. But again, I believe the number of questions for CASP are adaptable, meaning it could change based on your experience, right? It could be more questions, could be fewer, but it's somewhere around 65 to probably 80. CASP requires 5 years of technical security experience at an enterprise level and 10 years of IT experience. CISSP requires 5 years security experience, just security experience. They don't care about your IT experience. Okay. There are waivers that can be offered for both to lower that required experience level. CASP is about $399 to sit the exam. CISSP is strongly and has been for many years $599. Again, I would expect that price to change sometime soon, meaning going up. Finally, CISM. I only have 2 slides. I know I have about 13, 14 minutes left, but I only have 2 slides on CISM. Not to short CISM at all. It is a worthy certification. It is a good certification, but it's really focused on a niche, right? Where I have CASP for practitioners and technologists. I have CISSP for really people who are transitioning to management. CISM really focuses on managers, people who have never really done the technical stuff, people who could care less about the technical stuff, people who have been managers perhaps all their lives and they want to manage now security, or they want to move into security, information security management. They don't know what an OSI reference model is. They have no clue to how crypto works, and they don't care. They don't really understand what a firewall does. What? How can they be a security information security manager? Oh, they can, because look, what are they focused on? Information security governance, information risk management and compliance, information security program development and management, and information security incident management. The 4 domains of CISM are really all about high-level management of an information security management system. What is governance defined in the first domain? The second domain is, okay, what is risk management? What is a risk assessment? How do I manage risks? And how do I show I'm compliant with my own policies and I'm meeting the acceptable level of risk that's been established by the organization? And then domain 3 is, then how do I implement these controls from a high level, providing the framework, if you will, to implementation. And then finally, 4 is security incidents. When a security incident takes place, no matter what it is, physical or technological, how do I address that? What kind of framework should I set up? What are the different roles and responsibilities? That's really what CISM is focused on. It doesn't get into crypto. It doesn't get into what kind of firewalls, really. It gets into policy development, process development, procedural development, frameworks that we can borrow from and leverage. We're going to talk about SABSA in that, if you ever heard the Sherwood Applied Business Security Architecture. We're going to get into ITIL. We're going to talk about COBIT, ISO IEC 27000. We get into talking about those as, kind of the models to use for security and information security management. Okay? So it really is management. So if you're the type of person that doesn't understand the technologies and don't really want to get into that, truly, CISM is for you. It is a scenario-based exam, 200 multiple choice questions along the same lines as ISC squared CISSP. This is about 4 hours. I think the questions are a lot easier to really understand and to provide an answer for. This exam to me was a little easier, to be honest with you. I studied for my CISSP, and I used the knowledge there that I gained in that study to actually take my CISM exam. Okay, so I didn't have to really provide separate, study time truly for CISM. I did get some questions to work through just to see where they were coming from. You know what I mean? But what you learn in CISSP, if you go through formal training or if you self-study, that information security, governance, and risk management section, along with like business continuity and security architectures, those 3 domains of the CISSP basically are all you truly need to actually take your CISM exam. Okay, so the only thing you might want to do is get yourself in either a prep class or something along that lines, just to focus on, well, what kind of questions can I expect, and how are they going to ask them of me, and what answers are they looking for. Recertification is along the same lines as CISSP, 120 CPEs, continuing professional education units on the 3-year cycle. Very similar CPE requirements when it comes to what qualifies as a CPE. That is, again, an hour of instruction or training or conference time will equate to 1 CPE. The subject matter that's focused on for CISM is really management concepts from the GCR. That is, or some may say GRC. So governance, compliance, and risk management. CISM recertification. By the way, normally I have a question here, but as far as what the question looks like, but it's very similar to that of CISSP. So CISM recertification, 120 CPEs, as I mentioned, $45 AMF or an $85 AMF. What's the difference? Well, the cost of the exam and the annual maintenance fees are all based on whether you're a member of ISACA. Okay, so let's go back. CompTIA creates CASP or manages CASP. The keeper of CISSP is ISC squared, and the keeper and administrator of CISM is ISACA. ISACA is a little different organization. They are a membership organization for which you can be a member without holding a certification. That isn't true of ISC squared. You have to hold a certification to be a member of ISC squared. With ISACA, you can become a member independently of certification. And just because you're certified doesn't make you a member. Okay? So if you're a member, the annual maintenance fee is $45. If you are a non-member who holds the cert, it's $85 a year. You must also adhere to a code of ethics. You must fill out an application before you can even take the exam. And the experience requirements are similar. They're 5 years with certain waivers that can be granted. For example, if I want to become a CISM and I already hold the CISSP, I can get a 2-year waiver for experience, where I only now need to prove 3 years of security management experience. And if I hold other certs, like Security Plus, let's say, I can get a 1-year waiver. Okay? So I highly recommend that you take a look at their website for the latest on which certifications qualify for the 2-year waiver versus a 1-year waiver. All the 2-year waiver ones are there. CISA, the Certified Information Systems Auditor, which is ISACA certification, CISSP, and not only certification, but a postgraduate degree would also allow for a 2-year waiver. Okay? The price of the exam varies and it changes all the time. Here's the only funny thing about it as I bring this to a close, and that is if you're a non-member, the exam price is higher, obviously. And to me, it's always worth becoming a member than paying the lower price, because membership does have other benefits. Sound like a commercial there. And then finally, the thing about membership, God, it just went out of my head. But membership, so it's worth it to get the membership, in my opinion. And then, oh, that's right, the price of the exam. I apologize. So it's worth it to get the membership and then buy the exam at a lower price. It kind of makes up the difference, okay? But the membership has additional benefits. And then the other part of that was, if you want to do a hard copy, send in your application a hard copy, they charge you more than doing it online. So look out for that when you look at the pricing for the exam. All right, my friends. Well, I've talked a lot and didn't give you a lot of time for questions. I think we'll take a few. I've got a moderator here to help me out with that. But if you have further questions, my name is Claude Williams, and you can reach me at cwilliams@phoenixts.com. But I also have some colleagues that work with me. They're training and certification consultants. Sandra Jones, which is sjones@phoenixts.com, and Jeffrey Henley, which is jhenley@phoenixts.com, and their phone numbers are listed as well. You can find anything and everything about what we offer at phoenixts.com, including our email addresses. So I thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you got something out of this presentation, and pass it on to your friends who are looking to get certified as one of these, or as certified in many or multiple of these disciplines. I think this might be of value to you. Okay, just trying to see if there's any questions. Let me go ahead and kill this share and see if anybody has listed any questions. And at this point, I don't see any. So I thank you very much for your time and attention. And again, please pass this on to anyone who's considering one of those certifications. Otherwise, if you have direct questions at a later point, you can reach any one of the three I listed, myself, Sandra Jones, or Jeff Henley, at phoenixts.com. Thank you very much.